Good morning.
Good morning.
Having just conducted a ceremony where the large bell was hit numerous times, I'm very happy to announce that Reverend Fomen has discovered that there are actually dynamics to music, which of course is what the bells are. Did you notice that, Monk? Yeah, he learned how to hit the bell softly, which is always nice, you know, to have in your repertoire loud bell, medium bell, soft bell, barely bell, stopping bell. You know, in the practice of Buddhism, and particularly in the practice of Zen, we talk about paying attention. I'm always reminded of my first student, who was very important to this center and to me because he moved here with me from Long Beach to begin a meditation retreat center, which eventually became a temple and retreat center. And we built we built all the original buildings together. Neither of us having any idea what we were doing. We were just doing, you know, we had books we read every night about how to frame a wall, how to stand it up without it coming down, falling on top of you, and things like that. And after a little while had gone by, we originally thought we were going to have a retreat center, and that was the goal. And as time went by, people would talk to us, why don't you teach meditation? Why don't you do this? And I thought, well, you know, maybe we need to get active in the community. But in the beginning, we weren't doing that. We had people coming here. I even had people studying to be monks, Buddhist clergy, and we did not have the public coming in for ceremonies and services like we did today. Today we did renewing the precepts, which is normally done twice a month in Buddhist temples around the world. We do it at the last Sunday of each month, ignoring the phases of the moon. But Puja and I always sat every morning. That was his first name that he got when he was a layperson, and I always called him by that. His full name was Thich Hien. And again, we always sat every morning and we did some chanting and things, but it wasn't a public thing. We never thought to ask people to come over with us. And when we started training people, and it was a very unusual circumstance because I personally believe the best and most reasonable way to study for the Buddhist clergy is to live with your teacher. It's not always possible, but I've always considered that the best, and not only the best, but the easiest way. Because when you're around your teacher all the time, then things just kind of rub off on you. And there's always somebody that you can ask questions or observe. And I had people coming out of Los Angeles originally for retreats, and then they started talking about, well, I'd like to be a monk. Well, that's another talk about that, because Americans have an interesting idea of what it means to become a monk. And but I think I'll save that for another day, because I've come up with this talk and that talk. And those of you that have watched the videos on YouTube know that I struggle to come up with new topics. And I know, without a doubt, I keep repeating myself. How long ago did I give that talk? Oh, maybe they've forgotten that I gave that talk, that kind of thing. But there was one lady, and she was very wealthy. I found out as time went by that she had felt her father was a stockbroker, belonged to a very well-known company that I won't mention. And she was a model in the beginning of her life. And she felt very insecure because she didn't have a lot of money and a big house to live in like her dad did. So she told me one time that she had decided that she needed to have $2 million to feel comfortable. And once she acquired $2 million, then she could relax. I was talking with Miss Lon, half an hour ago, 40 minutes ago, and she was sharing with me that I talked about what we had talked about before the service, and she said, well, her daughter has some problems with depression and anxiety, and she was trying to share with her daughter what she should be doing, which all moms are going to do. Not that daughters ever listen to their mothers, but all moms share. And she told her daughter something that really struck home with me. She said, when I was your age, I didn't have time to get depressed or anxious because my main worry was food. Now, Miss Land is from Vietnam, and probably was a pretty big issue before she immigrated to America. Just the daily dealing with the need of food. And I shared that with her because I discovered when I became an adult that we actually were quite poor. Not in the things that count, but certainly in material things. And I was wearing hand-me-downs in high school. And so happy that I was getting them from a neighbor. So we had these people training here. And they were doing the best they could, but they were coming here once a month for a retreat, and that was basically it. And I began teaching down in Orange County. It was 25, 30 years ago. And I was teaching a class every Friday night, and then Saturday morning another class at a temple, sutra studies, and then in the afternoon I would go to a second temple and I would teach meditation and give a Dharma talk. And so I told those students, well, you need to come to the Friday night class so we have weekly contact. I was starting to realize that this really helped a lot in their growth as student monks. And as time went by, it was an interesting set of circumstances. I had one student who was fully ordained who came to me to do his 5-year obligation, which Buddhist monks have. That after you're fully ordained, you have to reside with your teacher for 5 years so that you can learn really important stuff. Because when you're a novice, what you learn is what you don't know. And I always tell everybody when they become a novice that you now have the opportunity for the next few years to know nothing. And you should work on knowing nothing. And when you're comfortable with that, then it's time to start. And so what are these brand new, yellow-robed, golly gee whiz, they must be enlightened or nobody would have been ordained them monks supposed to learn? Well, they're supposed to learn how to replace the water valve in the toilet, and they're supposed to learn how to greet people when they come to the temple, and they're supposed to learn how to care for people when they come to the temple, and maybe even how to feed them. I have a disciple which has mastered the thing of, I'm going to take care of your comfort when we come to the temple, and that would be the monk sitting over there. He constantly, I've never seen it, I feel like I'm at a Denny's or something. When people come here, he just starts dragging out food. You know, as he's doing it, he goes, are you hungry? Would you like something? Here, have some of this. Let me go fix some of that for you. Those are the things you learn in your 5 years. You also learn how to pay bills, hopefully. How to be happy when nobody comes, and how to be happy when too many people come. And all of those lessons go into that. And that, if it was a college course, it would be called The Ins and Outs of Managing a Temple. And then maybe there would be a colon and it would say, and staying sane while you're doing it. So, there, get back to the millionaire girl. She had been a model, and she, I guess, still had $2 million in the bank. I don't know, I never asked her. She drove a Jaguar. And one day I said, it's very interesting for a monk. By the way, I call men and women monks because none has so much baggage. First of all, they have to wear the whipple and all that stuff, although I think you might like that if you had to wear a whipple. Yep.
Whipple.
And so, so I said to her, or rather, after she told me all of this, she had a Jaguar, and I said, it's very unusual for, a monk. I said, my first teacher, he commented one time that people don't understand a monk driving a Mercedes-Benz. And it stuck in my head. I thought, I don't understand that either. You got that much money and you're not feeding people? I mean, what's going on? So she had the Jaguar, and I said, it's quite a fancy car. Very expensive too. We're not talking about she went out. I had a friend that bought a used Jaguar and then complained for the next, I don't know, she had it 5 or 6 years, complained about how much it cost to repair it. By the way, British cars break down all the time. And I finally said to her, I said, why would you buy a car that you had to repair all the time? Didn't you know? Well, I just love them. I love the look and the status they gave you. They're such wonderful cars. I said, yeah, as long as you don't mind having, the super service from AAA to get towed on a regular basis. And so she told me, she said, well, I have this because when I go to certain places, people leave my car alone because they think I'm a drug dealer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that would only from Los Angeles would somebody come up with that kind of logic,
That's true.
It must be a drug dealer, so we won't mess with his car or her car. She was an interesting gal. Everything was conditional. Life was conditional on her having $2 million before she felt secure. She really wanted to see the beginning and the end. And I don't usually say anything to someone who becomes a novice here at our temple, or gets the yellow robe, as I call full ordination at our temple. I don't usually say to them, this goes on forever. There is no ending. Nope, you don't graduate. Now you're fully ordained, and in 10 years you can start training monks if you want to, if you feel competent. And in 20 or 30 years you can be the ordination master for a big ceremony. That's about it. And if you're nice, people will give you titles. If you think you're enlightened, come back in 20 years and I'll test you. I'm not interested right now because there's no way you could be, because you haven't spent that much time working on yourself. Oh, well, I had an epiphany, they say. That's nice. I've had many epiphanies, and they had nothing to do with being enlightened. I have a student that had an epiphany and announced that he was a Zen master and fully enlightened. Well, I'll let you know if I ever get to that point, because I want to have that epiphany that declares to my psyche that I'm fully awakened and have absolutely no problems. Because that's the image we have of a fully awakened person, is that they're just about as close to perfect as you can get. And you should be laughing now as you're looking at me, because I certainly don't think that I'm even remotely close to perfect. But she wanted a beginning and an end. And she complained. I started to tell you about this one student that was with me for his 5 years training. Well, she wanted to be his student, and I have to be honest, he kind of liked the idea of having a student. It's part of the illness of Zen in America, which I'm not going to talk about now, but just accept it for face value, that Americans spend way too much time worrying about being the teacher and not enough time worrying about being the student. And so she complained. And she complained to that wonderful man that moved here with me, that I call Puja. And she said to him, if he would just write all this stuff down, then I could study it. And he said to her, he doesn't need to write it down. All you have to do is pay attention. and she never, ever got it. And an awful lot of students just don't get it. How are we supposed to do this? Well, pay attention. See, my job is to set the example. Now, if we're going to change the water valve in a toilet, I'm going to get the Venerable Tom Mung to go with me so that I can show him how to replace the water valve in a toilet. What the hell has that got to do with being a monk? Well, if you can't flush the toilet, it's got a lot to do with it. And if we're going to hang some drywall, it would be nice if somebody other than me knew how to do it, right? So we do the same thing with hanging drywall that we do with meditation. We set the example. And then they can see how things are supposed to be done. And he said that to her and she didn't buy it. Because she came back later and on a regular basis complained to him because she wouldn't complain to me. Although she did come in one day, I remember this and I'd forgotten about it. She came in one day for the interview that Zen masters have with their students during retreats. And she came in there and she announced that she was no longer afraid of me. And I said, that's good. Who told you you were supposed to be afraid of me? Well, you know, this and that. I said, well. And then she started offering criticism. And I said, who told you you had the right to criticize me? The interview process is for me to coach you in your practice. It's not for you to come in and tell me you don't like the food, or I make you sit for too long. That sounds like a personal problem to me. Yeah, no, you're in here so I can help you through your meditation practice, or any other problem you're having. I'm working on my own problems all by myself. Well, she never ever got it. She went to study with a Vietnamese master who was my master, and she really liked it because, you know, she hung around with wealthy people. And in Buddhism, when you're a high-ranking monk like he was, that's as close as we get to wealthy people. And so she liked hanging around with him, and she would drive him places. And he finally, out of compassion, gave her full ordination, and she promptly did nothing with it. And that's kind of a disappointment, but a good teacher learns to just move on. Pay attention to the students he has and not worry about the students that don't worry about themselves. So what is the point of this talk? I'm not real sure, except maybe we ought to pay attention once in a while to what's going on around us. I have a student that I've tried to understand. He's a very good person. But he has some interesting ideas, some kind of unique ideas. And he does not understand that his need to tell everybody that he's celibate every time he meets them connotes a problem. He doesn't understand it. And finally, a couple of years ago, I said to him, I said, you know, you really have to get over the problems you're having with celibacy. What do you mean? He said. I said, well, you have a very strong need to tell everybody you meet within 5 or 10 minutes of that first meeting that you're an octo-level vegetarian and you're celibate. And this is right after you tell them, if they need to be told, that you're a Buddhist monk. Since you'd be standing there in robes and everything, they probably can figure that out themselves. I had to go home and look up what an octo-level vegetarian was the first time I met him, because I wasn't sure. Octo, I thought that had something to do with music, you know. And lavo, I used to use that soap, you know, that green soap with the grit in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to use that, so I thought he's a musician that gets dirty hands and has to clean them. But I discovered, no, it meant that he ate eggs and he drank milk. I don't know why anybody needs to know that. If you go to a Vietnamese temple, and for those watching, we are in the Vietnamese tradition, although I did start off in the Japanese tradition. But you go to a Vietnamese temple or a Chinese temple, and they tend not to have eggs or milk. They're very much vegans in what they eat. And they're also extremely good at eating balanced diets so they stay healthy. Because monks are famous for living a long time. And they're eating good, healthy, because they eat lots of vegetables of all different colors. I always mention that to people. You're not doing the job if all you eat is yellow vegetables. You got to get the dark greens in there and the reds and the purples and get a little variety going in there. But he mentions that all the time, and he's not paying attention to what he's saying. And I tried kidding with him and it didn't work. Because he's so serious about this. And what that tells, well, one, that's just a personality trait of his. And I've been accused of being overly serious at times, so I kind of understand that. But he's so serious that he can't get it when somebody's kind of kidding him, you know. And so this continues on and on and on. But I pay a lot of attention to him. He originally studied with the Japanese teacher I studied with. And the Japanese teacher I studied with had one practice, really, and one practice only, and that was Zazen, as the Japanese call Buddhist meditation. And that teacher felt that all wisdom would come out of it, that all solutions to your problems would come out of it. And he wasn't wrong, but he didn't teach other things like Buddhism. He taught meditation. Somebody would go in and say, I've got horrible problems, I lost my job, I don't know what I'm going to do, and I'm overwhelmed. I feel like I should go out and buy a gun and shoot myself. This is horrible. I've got a family at home to feed, and I've lost my job. What am I going to do? And he would say, why don't you come over here and sit in meditation, and I'll come and ring the bell when you've done it for 45 minutes, and then we can talk. Now, that's not Buddhism, but it is very smart advice. How about if you stop thinking about yourself, because that's all self-centered. I've lost my job and I can't do all of these things. The word I keeps appearing over and over and over. He didn't come to that Zen master and say, what am I going to do? My children are hungry. Because I've had people do that with me. And I say, you go out and do whatever you have, whatever you need to do. If that means that you go and empty septic tanks with buckets, then that's what you do. If it means that you have to take a job for less than minimum wage, barely able to buy bread and milk, that's what you do. That would be my advice. Because your concern is about feeding your family. Your concern is not about you. But when somebody comes and says, oh, I've lost my job, it's terrible, what are people going to think? I think I'll buy a gun and shoot. That's all about you. So it's an interesting perception, I think. And this monk I'm talking about, he announces to people that his practice is loving kindness. What he says is metta. He has metta practice. Metta is an interesting word. It's Sanskrit, and it means non-possessive love. That's what it literally means, non-possessive love. He mentions love a lot. Well, let's go back to me paying attention. When he talks about he's celibate a lot, that tells me he's struggling with that. If he has to talk about being vegetarian and tell everybody he's a vegetarian, it makes life a little bit safe for him, because if we see him eating and he eats anything but vegetarian, we might say something. So that keeps him on the straight and narrow path, right? But he's also talking to himself. Remember that you're vegetarian. So he's struggling with that. No, I'm not saying that he doesn't keep a vegetarian table, I'm just saying he's struggling with that. He drives by Colonel Sanders and maybe his mouth starts to water and he thinks, oh, for the days when I could pull in there and have a little bucket of chicken and some mashed potatoes. I personally think Colonel Sanders has the greatest coleslaw in the entire world. I could eat just a bucket of that coleslaw, maybe a couple of biscuits. So he's doing a practice, and the practice is metta. And I really didn't know what his practice was. And I consider myself fairly knowledgeable after these few decades that I've been doing this practice about different types of meditation practices, you know. I know about the Pure Land meditation practices, and I know about the Tantric meditation practices, and I certainly know about the Mahayana and the Zen meditation practices, but it just didn't click in my head. What is this metta practice that he does? Well, I have to digress, which I do all the time anyway, but I'm warning you this time. When I was young and I was studying with my Vietnamese teacher, we opened a lot of temples and a lot of centers. Because what we do in Buddhism, we get a bunch of monks and we say, okay, we're going to open a temple, come bless the temple, then dedicate it. I'll have you speak, and you can come up and do a blessing with water and everything, and it'll be a spectacular ceremony. So we went over to this vihara, which is a word used in Theravada Buddhism for a place that monks live, a dwelling. But it also implies temple. And we went in there one night because they were getting ready to have a big dedication, and my master wanted us all to go and meet a couple of monks that lived there and blah, blah, blah. So that was an evening that they had meditation, and my teacher told me, we're going to have meditation. So I said, well, okay. So we went, we sat down on our little meditation cushion. I took 3 deep breaths all the way down. But my eyes half closed, began to meditate. And then in the middle of my meditation, this monk that was facilitating the meditation began going, may I be happy, may I be well, blah, 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 blah. And for a half hour he talked. And I sat there trying to ignore him. And then when it was all over with and we were going back to our temple, I said, what in the heck was that? And my friend said, oh, that's a guided meditation. Guided to where? I said, well, no, that's the way they do it. And I was young and I didn't understand that if I have to say, may I be happy, I'm not happy. May I be well, I must be sick. May I know love, that's part of what he recites. I feel alone. You know, to not be loved, that's got to be incredibly lonely. Right?
I would assume
Don't
so.
you think? Huh?
I would assume so.
Yes, I assume so. She's well loved by her husband and her daughter and her son, and the world loves her, so she doesn't go, I don't know. I have to imagine. I've always felt loved. But I have to imagine what it would be like. Now, I've gotten on Greyhound buses and gone to towns that I didn't live in and stepped off the bus and looked around and there was nobody to love me. But I still felt loved. And to not feel loved, God, that's got to be terrible. Maybe that's why people commit suicide, because they don't feel loved. Or they don't truly understand what love is. So, that's what he does, but I didn't know what he was doing. And it got to the point of curiosity that I finally got out my phone. I love the phone, the portable computer. I don't play games. I played Pac-Man one time on the television set and said, I will never do this again. This is like heroin. This is the most addictive activity I've ever seen in my life. I was at a friend's house. I said, nope. When they came out with them in the arcades and stuff, nope. I played pinball. Remember pinball? You tried to tilt the table without causing it to tilt. Yeah, so. I found out that this was what was going on, and I thought, it must be a very bad place to be in, that you have to keep reminding yourself that this is what you want. It's kind of like in the practice of Zen, just the practice of meditation, which supposedly leads down the road to enlightenment. It's kind of like going out to do meditation and telling yourself, as you begin your meditation, now there's a couple different kinds of meditation, but that's another talk within Zen. And you go out and you sit there, and the first thing you think to yourself, I'm going to be enlightened today. I know I'm going to be enlightened today. If I just think strong enough and hard enough, I will be enlightened today. Ooh, it's kind of like, well, I'm going to be happy today. I'm going to find somebody to love me today. Oh, I'm going to make all these things magically happen with my mind. This is called superstition. It's not called the practical world. Because when you go out there, what you want to do is discover yourself. And you have some old guy like me that tells you, you haven't got a clue who you are. I think you have a little clue. Yeah, a little clue. But most people don't have a clue who they are. They think they're the person that is described by their friends, or their mother, or a really good teacher they had, or somebody they knew in the service. They think that's who they are. And you take all that away, and what's left is you. Take everybody's opinion of you away. You don't need my opinion to be who you are. You may need confirmation. You might come to me and say, I think I'm a really good person, but I'm not sure. And I go, you're a good person. And you go, oh, well, okay. Since you think so, I trust your judgment. But this idea of ourself is very elusive, and it has very little to do with the reality. You know, we have people that never take credit for good things they do. They don't need to take credit, but it's too bad if they think they're a bad person. They don't realize that they're doing good. You know, the guy down there putting the turkey and the stuffing and cranberry stuff at the mission on the plate of the guy that's living on the street, he's doing something good. He's not being critical of the guy that lives on the street. Because most of those guys that live on the street, it's pretty much a choice. They kind of gave up. Or they really like to camp out. When I was young, I really liked to camp out. I thought, well, it's not bad. What, you got a tent and sleeping bag? What more do you need? I used to carry one around the trunk of my car. Had a box of beans, you know, little canned goods, can opener, Coleman stove, bunch of blankets, didn't own a sleeping bag. I was just get in that car after work and go camping anytime I wanted to. But this notion of paying attention to what's going on. So do you need to pay attention to yourself so much? Well, you do if you keep telling people who you are. Because that's the great delusion. So when you say something like, well, I'm a monk, I need you to know that I'm a monk. Now he goes out, we go out in public, he's all the time got his monk's robes on. And sometimes people, he has great luck though, because everybody likes him. He's the most likable monk I've ever met. He goes out, people come up and they go, are you a monk?